Freedom. It's a word we hear all the time, right? It's something people fight for, die for, build entire nations around. But what if I told you that what you think freedom is, well, it might just be one tiny piece of a much bigger, way more complicated, and honestly, a much more fascinating puzzle?
Okay, let's get into it.
So in this explainer, we're going to tackle that exact question. We're going to peel back all the layers on this idea we think we know so well, and we're going to explore the paradoxes and the conflicts that are hiding just beneath the surface.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with the familiar, the idea of choice. Then we'll get into a classic philosophical split between two types of liberty. From there, we'll look at the difference between real freedom and just, being unrestrained. We'll dive into a pretty radical existentialist view, and then we'll see how another school of thought basically questions if we're free at all. And finally, we'll pull it all together and see what it means for us right now.
Okay, let's kick things off with a model of freedom that probably feels super familiar, especially if you're in the United States. It's this core idea that freedom is all about having choices.
This logic is just so deeply baked into the culture that it feels almost like a law of nature. More choice equals more freedom, and more freedom automatically leads to a better, happier life. It's simple, it's powerful, and let's be honest, it's a really appealing idea.
And what's so fascinating here is how this whole idea of choice shapes a very specific model of what it means to be a person. The ideal self is independent, in control, and totally defined by the choices they make. Just think about something as simple as ordering a coffee. Decaf, non-fat milk, an extra shot, whatever. It's way more than just a drink. It's like this little performance of your unique personality. In this worldview, you literally are what you choose. But is that the whole story?
To really get to the bottom of this, we've got to turn to philosophy, because this idea of freedom, it turns out, is not as simple as just having more options. In fact, one of the most important thinkers on this topic said there are two totally different ways to think about it. And this distinction, which was first laid out by the philosopher Isaiah Berlin way back in 1958, it completely changed the conversation. He gave us this framework that helps explain so many of the arguments and debates we're still having about freedom today.
And this lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got negative liberty. Just think of this as freedom from. Freedom from what? Well, from obstacles, from other people getting in your way. It asks the question, where am I left alone to do what I want, without anyone interfering? But then, on the other side, you have positive liberty. And this is all about freedom too. It's not just about no one stopping you, it's about having the actual power, the resources, the education, the ability to fulfill your potential, to be your own master. So here's the key. You can have total freedom from interference, but still not have the freedom to actually achieve your goals.
So that brings us to another really important distinction. Is freedom just about doing whatever you want whenever you want? Or is there, a little more to it than that?
I love this quote from a patient in therapy because it just captures the issue perfectly. He had all the freedom from constraints he could ever want, but he realized it wasn't making him feel free. It was something else. He was just on the loose.
And that's really the core difference between freedom and what you might call license. See, true freedom comes with responsibility. It's guided by reason, and it understands that you're part of a bigger community. License, on the other hand, is just choice without any guardrails. It's this idea that you have a blank check to do whatever you feel like, no matter how it affects other people. And in the long run, that kind of thinking just destroys community.
Okay, so we've seen that freedom is more than just choice, and it's more than just being left alone. But now we're going to take a really sharp turn. What if freedom isn't this amazing gift we should all cherish, but instead it's a crushing burden we have to carry? Let's check out the existentialist view.
The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre had this completely radical and, frankly, kind of terrifying take on freedom. For him, it isn't something that's given to you. It's not something you can earn or even lose. It is the fundamental, inescapable condition of being human.
Condemned to be free. Just let that sink in for a second. Condemned. It sounds like a prison sentence, right? Sartre says that because there's no God, no pre-written plan for humanity, we're just thrown into the world without an instruction manual. And because of that, we are completely, terrifyingly free, which means we are responsible for creating not just our own lives, but our own values from scratch.
So for Sartre, there's no blaming your genes or your childhood or society. Existence precedes essence means you exist first, and only then, through the choices you make, do you define who you are. you have to carry the total weight of the world on your shoulders. And to pretend otherwise, to make excuses or blame someone else, well, that's living in what he called bad faith. It's basically a form of lying to yourself.
But hold on. What if Sartre is wrong? What if that feeling of absolute radical freedom is actually an illusion itself? Another giant of 20th century thought, Michel Foucault, came up with a powerful counterargument.
Now, to get Foucault, you first have to understand his key concept of discourse. It's not just talking. A discourse is a whole system of thinking about something. It's the language, the categories, the assumptions that shape what we even consider to be true or normal. And here's the kicker. It's an instrument of power.
So Foucault throws this huge wrench into Sartre's idea of radical freedom. He asks, are your choices really yours? Or have they already been shaped for you by the discourses that you're swimming in every single day? These invisible systems of power don't need to use force. They govern us from a distance by defining the very options we have to choose from in the first place.
Let's make this more concrete with a couple examples. Think about the discourse of the criminal. The way we talk and think about criminals shapes our entire justice system. Or the discourse of child development, which tells us exactly what a normal kid should be doing at every age, creating all this pressure. These discourses are like the unwritten rules of the game that create our reality, and most of the time we don't even notice they're there. Okay, so we've got all these competing, really powerful ideas about what freedom is. Let's try to bring it all home and see how these different views actually play out in the real world, in our culture and our politics. Check out this fascinating experiment. So, people were offered a choice between a bunch of pens. Most were one color, but one was a different, unique color. A huge majority of European Americans, 78%, chose the unique pen. But for East Asians, the result was basically the opposite. Only 31% did. Now, this doesn't mean one group is freer than the other. It just means that the very act of choosing holds a different cultural meaning. For one group, it's about expressing your uniqueness, and for the other, it might be about showing a preference for harmony with the group. And these ideas are right at the heart of our political debates. A libertarian view, for example, is all about Isaiah Berlin's negative liberty. They'd argue that any government interference with private property is a restriction on freedom, plain and simple. But an egalitarian view might come from that positive liberty perspective and say, well, wait a minute. The existence of private property itself can restrict the real freedom of people who don't have any. So they might argue that some redistribution is necessary to give everyone the capacity to truly be free.
So, where does all this leave us? I think it's pretty clear that freedom isn't just one simple thing. It's really a battleground of competing ideas. It's the American ideal of personal choice. It's the collective power to achieve your potential. It's Sartre's terrifying burden of responsibility. And maybe it's even Foucault's subtle illusion, shaped by forces we can't even see.
All of these different freedoms are part of our world. They shape our laws, they shape our cultures, and they shape who we are. So maybe the ultimate question isn't just, what is freedom? The question is for you. When you talk about freedom, or fight for it, or even just choose your coffee in the morning, which freedom are you really talking about? Of all these competing versions, which one matters most in your life?